I'm going to ask Reverend Robert Bock, if you would come up, Bob, and share with us from Hollywood Beverly Christian Church some remembrances. Bob, would you do that now, please?
Thank you very much, Dr. Richter. A poet once wrote that while we live on the face of this earth, we're in the process of weaving a giant tapestry, and when we come to the end of our earthly days, we can pause and we can look back upon this tapestry, and in it we will have sown all of the thoughts, the experiences, the conversations, even the dreams of life. And that when we look at the tapestry in its final form, it will be the bright and the beautiful and the wonderful threads that come to the front of the tapestry, while the threads of sadness and of grief will melt into the background. As I listened to Dr. Richter speak about Birdie, I realized that what we're doing today is we're literally looking over our own shoulders, and we're describing to one another the beautiful threads that we know that Birdie has sown within our lives, and the patterns that she has given to each of us as her gift to each of us as individuals. No two of us will see her in exactly the same way. No two of us will see the pattern woven in exactly the same threads. I would like to share with you just very briefly a period in Birdie's life for which there are many more people seated in this sanctuary today that could describe it perhaps in a better way. The years 1955 through 1969, 14 years in a life. In 1955, LG was over at, do they call you that here, LG? Lloyd Henry. Lloyd Henry Gysin was over at First Presbyterian Church, the largest church in Hollywood, and Birdie was at the First Congregational Church working with their choirs. And Dr. Cleveland Kleihauer at Hollywood Beverly Christian Church, the oldest church in Hollywood, extended to the couple an invitation to become the ministers of music. There, for 14 years, they developed a program that encountered 5 choirs, 4 children and youth choirs, and Lloyd's chancel choir. Dr. Kleihauer died in 1959, and in 1961, Dr. Myron Cole became the senior pastor of that church, and it was at that time that I joined the staff, and for the next 9 years, Birdie and Lloyd and I worked together. Birdie and I working with the youth and the children of the church. Hollywood in the 50s was a town of tremendous stability. You still had family units, you had family homes, a few apartments. But during the ministry that Lloyd and Birdie shared in that congregation, Hollywood became a major port of entry for almost everyone who was coming to the Los Angeles area. In 1965, it is said that there was over 1,000 new school children every week in the Los Angeles city schools, and most of them were trying to live somewhere in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And so Birdie, who had come to that church and developed 4 children and youth choirs, found herself with a tremendous change taking place in the constituency with which she worked. There were the church families and the young people and children who were growing up within the church and had a history of the church. And then there was this whole group of new young people who had been transplanted, many of them without any church background. And so Birdie, instead of being just a minister of music, found herself being a teacher, a social worker, a surrogate mother, a counselor, and filling needs that I'm sure she never dreamed were possible to fill in the lives of these children and youth. It was not an easy job. Those were very difficult days in our society and very difficult days for Hollywood as the whole transition of the community took place. But they were wonderful years because it was during those years Laurie came to keep her 3 brothers in shape and whip them around. I remember so many things about Birdie because we worked so closely together, but I want to just touch on 3. One was an attitude that she had of compassion. Many of the young people with whom we worked during those years were troubled. They were abused kids. They were abandoned kids. And along with the young people in the church, Birdie formed a network that ministered to their every need. And the compassion that she felt for people, especially youth and children, was unmatched in anyone that I've ever known. She cried with them, she laughed with them, she played with them, she worked with them. She did all of the things that you would want to do to give young people a greater sense of importance, a self-image that they could take with them through the rest of their lives. And so I remember Birdie's compassion, and I remember her extending it to everyone who came in her realm. The second thing I remember about Birdie was her association, not only with the entire congregation, but with a smaller group that Dr. Kleihauer had started. And Lloyd and I think it was called the Co-ed group, but we're not real sure. But it was one of those groups that Dr. K started. And the friendships in that group continue right on to the Rileys, who stole them from us in 1969 to bring them out here. Those friendships have lasted over 35 years. And there were many Friday nights that Lloyd and Birdie shared their home, and others of us shared ours. In fact, we met on one Friday a month for over 12 years together, even after we had left Hollywood Beverly, and sharing the very essence of life and the concern that Birdie had for other people and their problems, and trying to help each one of us walk through our own trials and tribulations was unmatched. She just extended that very being into us, and when we were in her presence, we felt better because of her. The third is not a characteristic, it's an example, and I understand that people in this church have seen this also. The tradition at Hollywood Beverly was that in the spring of the year, before the spring show, Birdie took all of the junior high and high school kids up to the Arrow Bear Music Camp. And we were the first to use the facilities at Arrow Bear. That meant forging frozen and snow-covered roads, opening the doors, sweeping out the camp for the first time, setting up on Friday afternoon, having a rehearsal Friday evening, all day Saturday and Sunday, and then going home. And then the show would be a couple of weeks later. My memory of Birdie was with her hair in curlers, earplugs in her ears, covers over her eyes, an extra pillow in one hand and an extra blanket in the other, walking out and saying, "I'm going to bed now, and I advise the rest of you to do the same because tomorrow we work." We always played all night, Friday night, and at 11 o'clock Saturday morning, when we took the first break, every young person wished they had taken Birdie's advice. They were exhausted, and we all slept well Saturday because we knew there was rehearsals on Sunday. And Lloyd said the same thing happened at Pilgrim Pines with the choirs from this church as she took them there. Birdie had that ability to take a young person who had never sung, never acted, never been on stage, never been in costume, and for one moment in the magic of Richardson Hall, on the stage, she gave that young person the opportunity to feel like a Ginger Rogers or a Gordon MacRae or a Jeanette MacDonald or a Fred Astaire. And for many of those young people in Hollywood from 1955 to 1969, that remembrance of being on that stage with the spotlight on you in South Pacific or Carousel or My Fair Lady was a remembrance that stands perhaps single most as one of the most important days in their lives. And that is a gift that no one can ever take away from us. And until we meet Birdie again, we shall always cherish. Thank you very much.